Hi, everybody. You are listening to Chicas from China, the podcast where we talk about female travel, finding community, and breaking stereotypes. We're your hosts, Megan and Samantha, and today we are talking about budgeting and accommodations.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this topic. We have both found really unique ways to afford travel, and we're here to break the stereotypes that you have to have all this money to travel, or that travel has to be luxurious, or even that budget travel equals hostels, because that's not always the case.
Yes, exactly. So we want to talk about all the different options that we use to travel on a budget and to make sure that we are financially responsible when we are country hopping. So a couple of those include hostels, like you mentioned, but also hotels, couch surfing, volunteer work, and also pet sitting. And if you're watching this video, I am currently in a hostel. I just got to Naples, Italy today, checked into my hostel, and I'm currently in my hostel room on my bunk bed recording this.
And I am currently dog sitting, so we are both taking advantage of those budget accommodation life right now as we speak.
Yeah, that's right. So, Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about your dog sitting adventures and your dog sitting background?
I started dog sitting about 3.5-ish years ago, back when I lived in Indiana. I completely worked from home and I was tired of having my back hurt while I was just sitting at my computer all day. And I said, hey, why not join the site called Rover? And I started getting paid for dog sits. And then I started to build a clientele based on my experience with senior dogs. That transferred over when I moved to LA. And I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could start doing this full time. And since then, my dog had passed away, but a year and a half ago, I was using a site called Trusted House Sitters and Host and Sister on Facebook, as we've talked about before, to find pet sitters, and a couple of them who had watched Champ were full-time, like nomads, full-time living out of their van or some other situation and just traveling the world pet sitting. And I thought that was a really cool way to be able to explore the local neighborhoods and get advice from a local and be able to stay for free. So that was like really good exchange. I know that some sites like I've trusted like Trusted House Sitters, I have had some mixed opinions on there, both as a sitter and as a host. So with those, really make sure you're looking for reviews and do not sign up for the site if you do not like pets. I feel like that should be obvious, but I feel like recently the site went viral like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and it attracted all these people just looking for free accommodations who didn't actually care about the pets. So if you have a background in pet sitting, if you have experience with animals, Megan has cats, I've had dogs, and like that's a really good avenue to show like, hey, I am a pet lover and I am ready to explore a new place. And it's a really good barter for both ends.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to make a distinction because you mentioned both Rover and Trusted House Sitters, where Rover, you get paid to pet sit, right? And you get paid on top of the accommodation. Whereas Trusted House Sitters, you do not get paid, you only get the free accommodation. And with Trusted House Sitters, there is an annual fee that you have to pay to be part of the platform. So as both a pet sitter and a pet owner, you do need to pay. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think it's 120 something, $130 maybe. For me, I have used Trusted House Sitters. I haven't used Rover, but I think that the annual fee for Trusted House Sitters is worth it because you can do as many sits as you want. And for example, most recently, I did a 2 week dog sit in London as well as a couple of days cat sit in London. And the majority of my 3 week London trip was completely covered by these pet sits, which is a huge savings for me. And I would have saved way more than the $100 platform fee just by pet sitting. So I personally think that it's worth it, even if I'm not getting paid on top of it, just for the accommodation. But I think if you are also seeking to do this as a job and to make money, then platforms like Rover and Wag are great options.
That's exactly what one of my dog's sitters were doing. So they were using a hybrid of Trusted House Sitters and Rover just because they weren't making money while they were traveling. And they're like, okay, it would be really nice. We're thankful for this free accommodation, but it would be really nice if we were earning some income with this. And because we have all these reviews from one site, they kind of transfer to the other. You can say, hey, I have worked for other people. Here are verified reviews. And I think that those verified reviews are really important for gaining trust and saying, hey, I've experienced with this. And when you do get that first client, go above and beyond them, worship them at their feet, leave the house completely spotless, send them lots of updates, and just treat their pet like a god. And you'll get a great review from that.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I think starting off, it is important to have those reviews, and it may be a little bit difficult if you are new to the site and don't have reviews yet, but definitely make sure that you go above and beyond to get those.
So, Megan, how did you get your first initial clients on Trusted House Sitters? What set you apart from the others?
I think it was a mix of different things. When you are on Trusted House Sitters, you have to apply to a sit. The way that it works is you can do a search by dates, by location, by type of animal that you're willing to sit for, and you'll see everything that comes up. And it changes daily, even multiple times a day, just because people are constantly posting available sits for their animals. And when you apply to a sit, there is an option for you to write a message. When I initially started, I just said, I have however many years of experience watching cats, dogs. I have experience with cats because I own them myself, and I am new to the platform. This is why I don't have reviews. However, I do have experience, and I would love to take care of your animal. And this is why I'm coming to your location. And you also want to make it seem like you are very friendly and you will leave their house clean. Just a message to make it seem like you're a trustworthy person. And that's kind of the most you can do in terms of a initial message. A lot of times, a pet owner will ask to do a video interview and kind of a chat with you just to get to know you a little bit better. Obviously, they want to make sure that they're picking the right person, especially when they have multiple people applying for the same sit. And the majority of people will kind of gauge you and assess whether or not they want you to sit based on that face to face video conversation. So I think it's really important to make yourself as friendly and as personal as possible. I don't always get the sits I apply for. A lot of them I don't get, and that's totally okay. Just make sure that you apply for as many as you're comfortable with. And something I learned about dogs is to be mindful of the dog breed when you are applying for sits, because if you are not cognizant of that, you may be applying for a dog that you are not prepared for, whether it's a puppy or maybe a special needs animal. And if you don't have the background for it, it may be a challenge. So just keep that in mind.
So many good points. I have a couple things to piggyback on. The first one about being clean is so important. At the beginning, I also used reviews from Airbnb that showed Samantha was a good guest. She was clean. She kept everything as it is. So even if you don't have those pet sitting reviews, you can pull reviews from other sites that people trust and say, hey, okay, she has a lot of reviews from these Airbnb hosts that she didn't trust her place. Let's pick her. You mentioned dog breeds, which is really important. I met a couple that were watching Champ, and they talked about 2 German Shepherds that they were watching that both were not fixed for show reasons, which I would not say a German Shepherd that was unfixed, and they had 2 of them, and they were in heat at the time. The and so just keeping these 2 giant German Shepherds away from each other in an apartment was just not an ideal situation, and they were at that sit for, I think they said 5 days, and they said it was just like a nightmare, and that's something that they'll never do again. And so since then, they have all these like laundry list of things they always ask the pet parent because nothing, I guess, should be assumed. I think it's really good to be proactive about, hey, is your dog on any medications? Or is there any special needs? How long can I leave your dog? Is your dog fixed? Are they reactive with people, babies, men, other dogs? Having all of that information up front is really important. And that can prevent you from getting in a situation that you're not prepared for, which might equal you being stressed and not enjoying your trip, a bad review, or someone getting injured.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think a lot of that is very specific to the animals. So, for example, we talked a lot about dogs. I do a lot of cat sits as well. And cats are a little less maintenance than dogs because you don't have to walk them. They're not exposed to as many elements as weather, other people, children, other animals. So it's a little bit easier in that sense. You can leave them for longer periods of time. However, there are different cat breeds as well, and you do have to be mindful of the cat breeds because some of them are more affectionate, some of them are more standoffish, things like that. There are other animals on Trusted Housers as well, including fish, reptiles, horses, farm animals, all of that. And I have seen farm animals on the platform, and I have no experience with farm animals, so I will never apply to those. But if you do, then that's great, right? So I think if you are one of the rare people who knows how to take care of horses, then that's good on you because I'm sure it's hard to find people who have that experience.
Absolutely. And when pitching yourself for anything in life and business, you work in HR, you are aware of this too. You need to show them why you are the best candidate for the job. In pageants, I did pageants to pay for both of my degrees, and we learned that you have to pitch yourself because the girl before you or after you is not going to pitch you. And you have to show them why you are that person for the job. So in that case, I am looking for a 2 week stay in London. That is not the way to pitch yourself. You are only thinking about it from your perspective that you want 2 weeks free in London, which is great, but that's not going to help the pet parent. And that doesn't tell them anything about how you're going to care for my dog. Are you going to be out partying until 4 a.m. and you're neglecting my dog? Are you going to be drugs, doing alcohol, all of these different things? So just being proactive and saying, "Hi, I'm Megan. I have a lot of different experience with all of these animals, and I'm here to give your cats, your dogs the best experience possible." So little things like that, putting yourself in the pet owner's shoes can give them a lot of reassurance and boost your rates of getting accepted for these gigs.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we have to be mindful that these animals are your pet parents' babies, right? They're their children, they're part of their family, and the pet parents really want someone who will love them the same way that they do and give them the same amount of attention. So think of that from their perspective and not just a free stay type of thing. You do want to make sure that your number one priority is to take care of the animal. It is a living being and they need love and attention just like everybody else.
So my biggest negative experience with trusted house sitters, I had 3 of them back to back in a row, which was super unfortunate because I had heard all these good things. The first girl, there were no red flags. She had a couple reviews. At the time I was living at the outsides of LA, so I considered my house good. It was a 2 bedroom, it was clean. I invited her to stay a few days early because she said she needed accommodation between her current sit in San Diego and mine. I said, "Okay, I have a spare bedroom. You can crash on my air mattress and then you can take over my bed when I leave." So she's in my house for 2 days and then she tells me that she can't do the sit and she needs to go home to New York or something. But she didn't give me an actual reason in terms of an emergency or whatever. And I'm like, get the heck out of my house, like within the hour. So that was ridiculous. The second issue, I was going on a trip for a week and I had a verified sit. They had a ton of reviews and experience with seniors, which my dog was. I'm like, okay, you guys are perfect. They canceled on me within 4 days of me leaving, and I was scrambling to find a new sitter. I chose a sitter who was not the best, and I it went against my better judgment and my gut feeling. However, because they were the only ones that had applied, and because it was so last minute, I was super desperate. I ended up getting a call from my landlord while I'm on this trip in a different country on a different time zone. And she's like, "Hi, we hear a couple screaming in your apartment." And I called one of my friends. I'm like, "Can you go over there and take over the situation?" And apparently they had trashed the house. They had trashed my bedding. I had to throw away all my bedding because it had dog urine all over it. And I know they had left him for
God.
extended periods of time. They were fighting to a point that the neighbors had called my landlord and had apparently been going several nights, and they found like I found drugs all over the house, like behind my alarm clock, like under the bed, and I don't do anything that they were smoking, so I knew it wasn't mine, and no one else had been in the apartment that it could have been in. So yeah, that was like my crazy story, and I think that if you're a pet parent trying to save money, use your judgment when choosing sitters too, and also like use these tips. That was my random tangent about trusted house sitters. Also, their insurance sucks, so those were my small caveats about the site.
Yeah, I think it's hit or miss. That's why the reviews are really important. And I know it kind of sucks to find somebody last minute because you now have to come down to why you don't have that many choices. But I think from a traveler's perspective, definitely make sure that you are one of the responsible people, that you will be taking care of their home, someone's animals or family, and yeah, make sure that you are just in general open, trustworthy, and don't cause problems like the crazy people that Samantha's encountered.
And it's interesting because I like the idea of trusted house sitters so much better than random Facebook groups because it has that review feature and it has their so-called insurance policy, which I did take advantage of and I was able to get reimbursed for some of the costs I had. But I've had the best luck on Facebook groups, even though it seems a little bit sketchier because there's no guarantee this person's going to show up. You're going based on a lot of trust. And unlike a platform, there's no review section other than potentially external reviews like Airbnb or Rover. But I've had really good experiences on there meeting up with people and then also finding people to dog sit. So it's one of those your mileage may vary situations depending on which route you want to go. I personally have had better luck on Facebook groups, but I know it's different for everyone.
That is a good point. Okay. Yeah, and then going back to Facebook groups, I think Facebook groups are a great way for any type of accommodation in addition to the pet sitting because we have had luck finding couch surfing options with via Facebook groups as well. We've talked about Host a Sister in the past and additional travel groups where females will offer to host you. Or if you put a message out that you need a host, someone might have an extra couch, an extra bedroom that you can crash on for a couple of days. I personally have hosted several different women in LA for extended periods of time, and it's been great. I think as a host, the experience is something I love because I already have the bedroom, I already have the couch. It's not really an extra cost to me, and I get to meet people from all over the world. And I've also been a guest at other people's places as well, which is amazing because you kind of see how kind people are in the world. And I've had hosts pick me up, drop me off, drive me to the airport, take me out for lunch, all those things. I think it's amazing to be able to see how people live and to get to know other people from that perspective. One of the cool stories that I have had is I've hosted a girl from Paris for 2 weeks, and a couple months later, I went to Paris, and then she hosted me for about a week or so. So it's great because now we're friends, and I can hang out with her whenever I'm in Paris. She can come stay with me and hang out with me in LA, and, we're cool like that. I've had several instances and stories like that. Don't discount Facebook groups in that way. I think it's a huge value.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit about this in episode 2, finding community while you're traveling, but I have had so many good experiences with Host a Sister, the Facebook group where Megan and I met actually. But it's just a really good way to find community while you're traveling and also save money. So originally saving money was one of my primary motivations, but as I got down to it, I would much rather stay and pay someone even to stay in their house rather than staying in a hostel or a hotel room just because I feel more comfortable with a local and it's a lot more fun, especially if you're solo traveling. And for me, it's just like a lot less stress. You are staying with an individual person. You don't have like 10 people in your dorm room snoring or causing ruckus, and you just get to like live life from a local's perspective. In Peru, I wasn't necessarily couch surfing, but I was staying like in a homestay through a Spanish program there, and it was at a discounted rate, and you got to stay with a local. I loved having breakfast with her every morning. Her name was Anna. She was older, and it was just so much fun to have breakfast in Spanish. She did not speak any English, and just like getting that cultural exchange was invaluable. It happened to be her birthday that week, and so me and the guy that was also staying with her in the homestay, we got her eclairs from this bakery because she told us eclairs were her favorite dessert. And just having those like small moments with the local and getting to hear like their perspective. She had grown up in Peru. It was just like an amazing experience. So take advantage of those cultural opportunities that can come from living with a local.
Yeah, that is really cool, and I think especially because you create that kind of bond with the local, and then they can give you tips and show you around their hometown, and I think it's exciting for hosts as well because they want to show travelers and people their home.
Yeah.
That's why they're opening up their home to you, and they are people who are also open-minded, and I think it takes a certain type of person to one, be a host, and two, to stay in a host's house in a country, right? I think there's some apprehension there about safety and things like that. But overall, I've had amazing experiences. I know you've had amazing experiences, and we haven't had any issues there. I know that you also recently had a great couch surfing experience through couchsurfing.com, which is the official platform
Yeah.
for it. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So in Singapore in particular, housing costs were very expensive, and I wanted to stay with a local if possible just to save money. Throughout the rest of Asia, I stayed in hostels or even hotels in some places, but in Singapore, I knew it was more expensive. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to shoot my shot. Let's try it. My first host, I stayed for 4 nights and I split it up between two people just because I don't like to overstay my welcome. And Singapore is really cramped and crowded like a lot of big cities. So in these cases, I was like kind of interfering on their personal life. They didn't have necessarily a spare bedroom. That's something to keep in mind when if you're visiting a city like London, New York City, LA. A lot of times people just don't have spare bedrooms available. And so if you are literally living in someone's living room, just be cognizant of your things and all that. The first host, he was a Singaporean and he was Spanish speaking and he had visited a lot in Latin America, which is really rare, I feel like, for to be a Spanish speaking Asian. I'm one of them. And we connected over that and he agreed to host me. He was amazing and I ended up really enjoying his roommate. His roommate and I stayed up until 4 a.m. several nights in a row, both nights. And then also when I was with the other couch surfing host. We ended up staying up just because, like, we ended up just, like, bonding, and it was a really good experience. He was my first male host, and then the second host was also male, and then with him, I was his first female guest. In both of those cases, I felt pretty safe because they've had really good reviews from males and females. I think if it's all good reviews from females, that's kind of a red flag. They both had a lot of travel experience, so it didn't seem that they were in it just to get women. They never hit it on me. They never made me feel uncomfortable. And in both cases, I had enough funds that if they were to have been creepy or if I needed to get up there ASAP, I would have been able to do so very quickly. I travel very light and I have like interviewed and talked to women who have been in situations where the conditions were less than ideal and they weren't able to get out immediately because of extenuating circumstances. So for me, I just had that backup plan to say, "Hey, I don't feel safe or comfortable here and I need to skedaddle for whatever reason." But fortunately, I never had those experiences. But really, like if you're staying with another male, especially, like do your like due diligence and do your research.
I haven't been couch surfing before through the couch surfing platform, but I think that's one of my concerns. I think a lot of people think about that as women to have a male host. And we hear those crazy stories about men being kind of creepy and feeling
Yeah.
like you are not comfortable in a situation. So definitely, again, read the reviews and make sure that you know who you're staying with and that you're comfortable with them as well.
I'm overall pretty cautious with couchsurfing.com just because when they got bought out several years ago, the entire platform shifted and they started to attract people that were not part of the original target audience. And I think that that's where a lot of the creepy stories got up. If you are in a situation where he is wanting to share a bed with you and things are escalating and he is touching you or maybe making you feel very uncomfortable, if you notice he's staring in inappropriately, those are red flags and it's time to get out of there before things escalate. I was working on a startup and I heard a lot of stories from women that ranged from mildly groping to trying to record while changing and just things got really escalated really
Oh my
quickly.
God, that's
And so,
crazy.
yeah, in those situations, just use your judgment and always have a backup plan.
Definitely. And I think that there are several different options. Sometimes when people find themselves in those situations, we don't know what we should do or what we can do to get out of the situation, but just know that there are options in terms of if you need to stay at a hostel, if you need to stay at a last minute hotel or reach out to people online via Facebook groups or whatnot, there's always someone out there to help. So if you find yourself in that situation, just know that you're not alone. And especially if you're a big city, that there are options for you. And again, like Samantha said, to know what your options are ahead of time, always have a plan B.
And tacking on to that, traveling light, is really helpful because in the one case of the girl who was staying at my house and decided not to watch my dog, she had a ton of stuff. So that was super awkward to say, "Hey, you have to leave like within the next hour." And she had multiple suitcases worth of things.
Mm.
So in that case, if you're just looking to get away very quickly, it can be helpful to pack light and you don't have to worry about awkwardly chucking an entire suitcase out.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that is can be applied to a lot of different situations. For example, I'm staying in a hostel now, and it's much easier to stay in hostels when you just have one bag or just have a backpack or something small, because usually when people stay in hostels, they're in shared rooms, and these rooms have multiple people, there's limited space, the lockers could be small or maybe non-existent, and you wanna make sure that you're not taking up more space than you intend to, right? Since you're sharing a space with multiple people. I find that just having a backpack and being able to minimize is the most effective way to pack, especially when you need to travel long distances and whatnot.
Speaking of hostels, what are some things that you look for in a really good hostel? Because not all hostels are created equal.
That is true. In terms of hostels, there's some countries hostels are more popular than other countries. I think in the US, hostels are not as popular. However, in Europe and Asia, Latin America, hostels are one of the more popular ways to stay if you're backpacking. Something I think about is the reviews for sure. If they're on Hostelworld, on Booking.com, there's always going to be reviews. If they have 4.5 stars or above, or 8 out of 10 or above, I will usually look at those first, make sure that they're clean, their bathrooms are clean, that the reviews are good in terms of the hosts. Everyone has a little bit of a different preference in terms of the crowd that they want to stay with. There are hostels that are more party, they're more young people, they're louder, there's hostel activities. And if you're social and that's what you want to do, then that's great. If you want to have a little more quiet time, maybe be outside the city, even inside the city, if you don't like things are super loud and rambunctious, or maybe an older crowd, there are hostels for that as well. So just keep in mind, those are things to think about. There are certain hostels that even market to certain age ranges. Some hostels will say 18 to 28, 18 to 30. They want to keep their demographic within a certain age range. So you kind of already know the clientele and the type of atmosphere that is going to be there. For me, it just depends. Sometimes I'm feeling more social if I'm in a bigger city, then maybe I want that. Sometimes I don't feel as social and maybe I want a quieter hostel. Price is also really important to me. I struggle sometimes between price and location
Mhm.
because usually the hostels with good locations are a little bit pricier compared to the cheaper hostels that are a little bit outside the city. So you kind of have to gauge what is important to you, whether or not you want to save some money and be able to maybe transit into a town, or if you want to just be in the center of all of it and have the convenience of being able to walk around. One last thing that I prefer, but most hostels don't have this, are pod style beds. In Japan, a lot of the hostels are pod style, and that's when it's fully enclosed, or enclosed on 3 sides, and then you have an entrance to get in. It's usually a curtain, and when you're in there, it feels like you're in a little private room, and I like it better. The majority of European hostels are not like that. They are just free for all bunk beds. Some of them have curtains, some of them don't have curtains, and you can just see everybody, which can be fine as well. So it's really up to what you are looking for.
I've seen some really good tips online of girls that have used either towels or tapestries. Am I saying that right? To block out
Tapestry.
noise. So if they don't have curtains on there, you can kind of DIY your own curtain, and that can help with noise reduction too. I recently bought headphones, like little noise reducing headphones. If you're a really sensitive sleeper, that could be an option. For me, when I was long term traveling in both Latin America and Asia, I was able to kind of like route my plan and mentally choose where I wanted to save money on a certain city and stay in a hostel, or whether I wanted to splurge and stay in a hotel. I personally don't love hostels just because I like my own space. I'd rather have a really small space to myself. And I'm kind of messy and I like to have all of my things out in the open and not have to worry about someone stealing my GoPro, my laptop, my drone, all of these. For example, when I was in Asia, I was saying, okay, Tokyo is a more expensive city. I can't afford a hotel here. It's not like I won't afford a hotel. Like I cannot afford a hotel for 2 weeks in Tokyo. So I was able to use like the pods and the hostels for those. Whereas in, I think it was Busan in South Korea, I was sick at that time, and I think there were also 25 to $30 a night for a private room. So I went that route because it ended up being very affordable for a private room, and I just wasn't feeling well. So it was nice to be able to recharge alone and have my own space.
Exactly. I think it's completely dependent on the country in terms of the affordability of it. For example, currently I'm traveling through Europe, so private rooms are a lot more expensive than in Asia or in Latin America. And so if I want to save money, then one of my few choices is a shared hostel. Or I could couch surf, I guess. And personally, I don't mind. I'm a pretty deep sleeper, so I can pretty much sleep anywhere. But I think it's a really good tip that Samantha gave in terms of getting headphones, getting earplugs, eye masks, things like that. These dorm rooms can get loud depending on where you are. It's not necessarily people that might get loud, it could also be noises outside the window and alarms, things like that.
I was recently at a hostel in London, and this one lady, she was older, and I couldn't figure out why she was staying in a hostel in the first place. But she complained I was brushing my teeth too loudly. Keep in mind, this was at 9 o'clock at night, and she was up talking, so it wasn't like she was trying to sleep. She complained about another lady's charger light that was not that bright, it was a normal light. And she was complaining about the noise outside, but then it was also hot in the room, and so we didn't want to close the window. And she was complaining about all of these different things. So if that is you, just spend the money on the hotel or the private room, because if you were that picky, I mean, I don't think hostel life is going to be for you. And that's fine. That's just something that you have to prioritize in your budget. But don't be like that lady.
I totally agree. I think it depends on you as a person and whether or not you are able to respect other people's space and, are able to kind of feel it out and gauge whether people want to be social or they might not want to be social.
And if you're traveling with a group, sometimes renting a four-bed hostel room is, like, the cheapest and best option because you all have your own space, but you guys all know each other, and so you're able to just rent out the entire space, and it's basically a private room, sometimes for cheaper than what you'd get somewhere else.
And I really want to talk about tips for saving money on hostels. So we know that hostels are discounted as it is because they're a cheaper form of accommodations. In addition to that, you can save money depending on the platform that you're going on. So, for example, on Hostel World, they have their own platform fees. Hostel World is a platform where you can do a search by city, by country, dates, and number of people. And they'll pull up all the hostels in that area that are registered on Hostel World. So keep in mind that not all hostels are registered on Hostel World, but I found hostels from all over the world on the platform. So the majority of them are there, and they do have their own Hostel World platform fees. I've found that Booking.com is actually a little bit cheaper. If you compare the same property, same dates, and the same number of people across both platforms, in general, Booking.com will be cheaper. So definitely look on multiple platforms. Also look on the hostel's direct booking website. So their direct website that tends to be cheaper as well. It's a little bit hit or miss. A lot of times, Booking.com is still cheaper. And I say that because they have something called Genius Discounts, and it's a rewards program that they have for booking through Booking.com consistently. If you get to a certain level, I think for level 3, you get a 20% off discount off of 10 accommodations, and a lot of hostels offer that as well. For example, because I'm this level 3 Genius discount person, I also get an additional discount off of that. So just compare, I would say, and see what works for you. The benefit to going through Hostelworld is that they have a chat. And sometimes I will go through Hostelworld directly because I want to be part of the chat and I want to meet people. And when you're in a big city, it's advantageous just because you might be traveling alone or with a small group of people. Maybe you want to make new friends. And everyone's in the chat asking to meet up for dinner, for hikes, for tours, all of that. So that is a benefit to booking directly through Hostel World. Another tip that I have for you is booking on the mobile, so on your phone versus a laptop. A lot of times, the mobile version is a little more expensive than booking through your laptop. Do a search for the same exact accommodation, dates, on both devices and see what is cheaper and what works out for you. What I found is majority of the time the laptop wins out.
That's interesting. I work in marketing, and so I'm very aware of how much data that we have on US consumers when you're visiting the website. I wonder if they associate mobile users as people looking for something quick and convenient, and I wonder if they associate laptop users with people that are studying more about what they're researching more and looking more into it. So that's very interesting.
Okay, I didn't think about that in terms of how they categorize people who use different devices. Good to
And
think
on
about.
top of that, if you can, I like to book in incognito mode. I haven't really done that with hotels or accommodations, but I do that a lot with flights. Like if I am looking continuously for flights to Chicago, Sydney, Toronto, wherever, they know I am wanting to go there. When you book in incognito mode, it deletes and it hides your browser history and your cookies, so they don't know you're as desperate as you are.
That's a good point.
Through Chase's reward platform, you get a $50 hotel credit. And I tend not to use hotels in the US. And if I do, it probably wouldn't be from that site because it's so expensive, because it is a little bit more expensive than your average stay. But if you are at a place like Ecuador or Thailand, then it can be about $50 for a couple nights in a hostel room. And even though it's a little bit more expensive than booking.com or other platforms, if you're not going to use the hotel credit otherwise, you might as well take advantage of it because it's $50 that is free that the platform's reimbursing you for. So I always try to save my $50 credit for overseas hostels just because I get more bang for my buck and I can use that credit and not let it go to waste. Because otherwise, for me, I mean, I'm not going to use it within the US.
What credit card do you have that has that credit?
I have the Chase Sapphire Preferred. It is a $95 annual fee, and it comes with a $50 annual Chase hotel credit, which is worth it for me. They have a more expensive card that has like a $500 annual fee with a $300 credit, which might make it worth it for flights, but I don't spend that much money to justify the $500 fee.
I think that's the one that I have. The one
The
with the
$500 one?
$500. Yeah.
Oh, really? Megan's balling
Yeah.
over there.
For me, I got it because of the sign-up bonus, because I knew I was gonna spend the limit and I wanted the bonus, and I felt like for the first year at least, it would have been worth it since they do give you a $300 travel credit, and then they give you the global entry and
Yes.
a ton of other benefits that I felt like offset the cost. And I knew I was going to travel anyway, so I was going to get those travel credits back.
Absolutely. That's a good point in terms of I hate questions like, what is the best travel credit card? Because there is no one best travel card that works for everyone. For me, that card just wouldn't make sense. But if you are someone that is traveling all of the time, like Megan is, you do get more points on certain purchases and you get bigger discounts on things. But for me, I don't need all these fancy things. So the cheaper one is better for my personal situation. But that's not the case for
Yeah,
everyone. I think that's really important when you're looking at advice from anyone. Like full-time travel content creators are probably traveling a lot more than you are. So just take the good things that you've gleaned from them, but you don't have to do exactly what they're doing.
exactly. And to clarify, that card is Chase Sapphire Reserve. Just because it works for me now doesn't mean that it's going to work for me a year from now. That's kind of the takeaway here as well, because it could work for somebody at that point in time, but you don't know, their situation could change and it might not work for them later down the line. So definitely read the fine print and make sure that when you are applying to those credit cards, that it works for your situation at this point in time.
I think it's a really weird thing that I've had to adjust to since I moved to California. I always grew up believing that when you do something, you have to stick with it forever. Back in my hometown, people stay at the same jobs forever. My parents still live in the same house that they first bought when they got married, have never moved. It's just been really freeing to know, hey, if something doesn't work out, you can switch it. Or if something is working, you can use it for now and switch later. So I think changing that mindset, if you are one of those people that always has to have things the same, it's okay to realize hey, this is working for me now, but this might not be what I do forever. And that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. I think that applies to both of our life situations as
Yeah,
well, right? If you are in a situation where you feel stuck or that you are not happy with, just know that you can always change your life and there are avenues to do it. Some may be more challenging than others, but it is possible in today's day and age.
absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, in terms of local hostels versus chains hostels, which one do you prefer or do you not have a preference?
It really depends. I like both. I would say that if I had to choose, I would probably choose a chain hostel, and here's why. There are certain chains that are predictable. I know what to expect. So the Selena hostels in South America, Latin America are great. I love the decor, I love the vibe, the ambience. I think they do a really great job in terms of location. Their locations are usually pretty great in central areas. In Europe, I really like the Meninger chain. They are a combination of hotel slash hostels. So they have a mix of different types of rooms. I like them because they are also very predictable, extremely consistent. They have workspaces, they have kitchens, they're very, very clean and room service every day. Because of that, if I know what I'm going to get and it's in that city, then I will choose a chain. I also like the smaller private hostels, but they're one-offs, and if I don't know them, if I don't trust them, maybe if I'm just a little bit wary about the city, then I may not choose that if I can have a chain hostel to choose from. I will say that the private ones, though, are a little more homey. I've definitely stayed in them before. The hosts are more personable. You see the host, they see you, they know you, they'll ask you what you need. Like they go above and beyond to provide a better quality experience for their guests.
I have gone back and forth with like the ethics of it and the like, dilemmas because I also really love the predictability of the chain hostels. I've stayed in a lot of Selenas. Each one I've stayed at, it's a very clean room. I know what to expect. I know I'm going to have a lot of different spaces to work, to meet new people. I've liked the people I've met in Selena hostels. I've noticed that there are really quality travelers in terms of they're not there to get smashed every night. They're there to explore the culture more. And a lot of the people that I still am in contact with from hostels have all been, I think, from Selena hostels. Whereas some of the other hostels, I just haven't kept in contact with them. Like we might add each other on social media, but I mean, I don't really talk to them. I think that that's interesting to know not only what to expect in terms of the cleanliness, but also in terms of the type of people that are there. But I really like supporting mom and pop hostels. I'm a small business owner and I love small businesses. And I know sometimes these chains can hurt the small businesses, especially in smaller areas like Antigua, Guatemala. And if possible, I do try to look for those smaller hostels, but I've stayed in a lot of really good ones where they are very consistent, very clean, really nice hosts. And I stayed in some really questionable ones that were kind of disgusting and had very questionable cleanliness standards. I think that that's something to keep in mind and just to think about when you are choosing where you want to spend your money.
I totally agree. Changing gears a little bit, I want to talk about hotels. I know some people are not comfortable with staying in hostels, maybe not comfortable couch surfing, and they're much more comfortable staying in hotels. Let's talk about how we can save money while staying in hotels as well. One of the things that I really like is paying with credit card points. I know everyone talks about this and everyone knows about the credit card points for travel. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode, in episode 4, when we talked about transportation and flights. But my recommendation and what I personally do is if I know I have a large expense coming up that's a couple $1,000s, and I know that a certain travel credit card has a sign up bonus for their points, I will apply for that credit card in order to make my large purchase. And that way, it'll be easy for me to spend the money since I have to spend it anyways and also get those points. Then I can apply the credit card points to hotels for trips that I'm planning. That does take a little bit of planning and foresight. You kind of have to predict a little bit out into the future, especially if you are planning to spend two, three, $4,000 on these cards. Keep in mind that once you spend the money, it takes a whole nother billing cycle for the points to actually hit your account. So it does take a couple of months, and you do need to plan ahead for it. But it is one of the best ways, I think, to save money on hotel accommodations. And it's pretty flexible. I like that there's more affordable hotels versus a little more higher end hotels they can choose from. I also have several hotel credit cards, and the ones I have do have fees. They're generally less than $100 a year, like 80 to $95 a year. However, they come with one free night at the hotel. And if you think about it, one night at this hotel chain is probably going to cost you more than 80, $90. So that alone is worth it for me.
Exactly. And if you are someone who travels frequently in terms of hotels, stay loyal to the chain that you are at because you're able to rack up a lot of loyalty points through there and you might get extra perks. Maybe it's not a discount on the room, but maybe it's an upgrade just because you have history with that hotel chain and or in their partners.
Exactly. One of the hotels that I like are IHG hotels, and this is just a personal one. It's not like an ad or anything for them, but I do have the credit card. They do give you a free night, and like you said, when you have the credit card, they any of their chains will give you kind of like a welcome gift when you check in. Usually it's like a little baggie with some water and treats and stuff. So that's always nice.
One of my favorite hotel chains was in Malaysia in Penang or Penang. I think it's Penang, but I don't fully remember. It didn't say this when I had been booking it. So I had my own private room, which was really nice. It was super cute. It was small, but it was exactly what I needed to recharge and have my own little space to myself. The downstairs was a bakery, which never had anyone in there. So you had that to yourself. The second floor was a bar, which I never saw anyone there, and I would often just hang out there in the evenings. I don't know what that was. And then it had like a woodsmith. I don't remember what it was, but it was some type of workshop type thing, which was also empty. So I had this whole space to myself, and I loved the vibes of it. It was very clean. I barely saw anyone the entire time I was there. I just checked out, I guess, threw my keys in there and checked in kind of like a similar way. I ended up being one of my favorite hotel experiences, like that indie hotel. So I think that's one of the things you can look out for when you are traveling is those little unique hotels. And this was also very affordable. I think it was only 25 or $30 American dollars a night. It was the most amazing experience because it was all cutesy and had all this personality in this little Malaysian town.
I think it really depends on the country as well. Sometimes it's more economical to even stay at a hotel. I was looking at hotels on Booking.com in Bali, and some of them were
Mhm.
as cheap as $8 a night, which is absolutely insane. At that point, I would just stay at hotels all night long, like I don't care. And these are nicer places. At that point, it's not even worth it for me to try to couch surf or find an even cheaper accommodation. Obviously, it depends on your budget and your preference, but if you're going to a cheaper country, then hotels could totally work out for you.
If you are from a bigger city, like we're from Los Angeles, another benefit you have is home swaps. So again, this can be done on Facebook groups or different home swapping sites, but that is another huge advantage to living in a big city. You're paying for this rent, you're going on maybe a week-long trip. Why not trade with someone who lives in New York City or Boston or Cologne or somewhere else? Those opportunities really are endless, especially for high demand seasons. For example, right now, Los Angeles, it's summer, which is really nice. A lot of locals in Paris are trading for other spots because they want to get out of Paris for the Olympics. But if you're wanting to go to Paris for the Olympics, accommodations are insane right now, and that could be a really great option for you. So take advantage of those spots and making those connections around the globe if you can.
I totally agree with that. I haven't done it myself, but I know there's groups, there's websites that facilitate the home exchange, and I really considered it because it's a great way if you want to take multiple people, maybe your entire family on a vacation, and you're swapping your entire house for someone's home. And that way, there's no exchange of money, and you both have this trusting relationship because you are allowing someone else into your home, whereas you are also staying in someone's home. So that's a really great point.
I think it also mitigates the risk on both sides. I mean, of course, there's risks to everything. Everything we talk about, even hotels, to be honest, there's always going to be risks involved. But when you are both staying in each other's houses, you're both in each other's private areas. So there's going to be some level of trust and there's got to be some level of like reciprocating the level of trust because in some of the cases, the trust can be sometimes a little bit one-sided because one side has to trust the other side a little bit more. But when you are home swapping, you guys are both on equal playing fields.
Yeah, yeah, it's a totally good point. All right, last thing I want to talk about is volunteer work for housing. There are several platforms that allow you to do this, including Workaway, Wolf, and Worldpackers. If you're not familiar with this, you can apply to these websites. They have several different opportunities for volunteer work, working locally in hostels and farms, whatnot, in exchange for accommodation and a lot of times food. So definitely check those out. I know several people who have done those. Some experiences I've heard can be hit or miss depending on the host of the volunteer work, but I've heard that you can learn a lot from volunteering with people. And these are people typically who may not be able to afford to have workers help them out. And it's usually a shorter amount of time. So a week, maybe a couple of days to a couple of weeks. And it's really on you and how long you want to stay there. If you are committed to maybe a 6 week volunteer program, you can always leave early if you're not comfortable with it or if it's not how you thought it was going to be as well. Just know that there are opportunities like that out there. And if you decide to change your mind, you can always change your mind.
I've heard really good stories of woofing. I have a couple really good friends that have done it and they loved it. One of my friends told me that she loved the experience, but because she was pretty far of the city, outside of the city, she didn't get to do as many things as she had in mind originally. So if you are in an area where you're farming, keep in mind that it might be very rural. And if you are farming in, say, France, it might not be the Paris experience you're expecting. It's going to be rural France. But if that is something that you're interested in, I've heard really good things and positive stories from there. And I think woofing and workaway are really ethical ways to volunteer too, just because it can hurt the local economy and the local markets. But woofing and workaway are like really reputable sites. Any sites where they're making you pay exorbitant amount of money for volunteering are usually not the most ethical because that money is not necessarily going to the people that it's helping. But woofing and workaway have really good reputations.
That is a good point and something to know when you are applying for the volunteer opportunities.
When it comes to all of these different opportunities, I feel like we have a triangle and we have three different points: good location, good price, or convenience. And you kind of have to choose two of the three. I feel like you can't always get all three of them. I think for me, at least, traveling has brought up my priorities and not only travel, but in life in general. It has really made me consider what I want to prioritize and what is not as important to me. And that looks different for everybody. What's been helpful for me with Facebook groups is I've been able to find people and travel buddies in particular that align with my beliefs. Because if you don't have aligned travel beliefs, it can be really complicated, even if the person's really great. If you guys get along in the real world, traveling together is a completely different ball game. So you just need to make sure you have your beliefs in check if you are traveling with someone.
I completely agree with that.
For example, when I was traveling in Asia and when I was looking for friends to travel with in Colombia, I knew that that was a really good way to split accommodations. And I was very clear in the Facebook post for the type of person that I wanted to travel with. In both of those cases, if I would not have gotten along with the person I traveled with, the worst that could have happened was we split a hotel room, which was the price I'd be paying for a hostel, except I get my own private space and we just go our separate ways. That's another option if you are trying to get in the middle of this hostel world, but you're really liking hotels. Try to find someone to split that hotel room with you. Make sure they have enough skin in the game in terms of cost so no one is screwing anyone over. Sharing a hotel room with someone, in my opinion, is a lot easier than sharing a full, like, 8 dorm bedroom in a hostel. And that can be a really easy way to easing yourself into the hostel world if you're wanting to start there, but you're not sure how to go about it and if you're a little bit apprehensive about it.
Totally agree. It's a great tip. That wraps up today's episode of Chicas from China. Thank you so much for tuning in. Follow us on social media at chicasfromchina.com, and you can find our show notes at chicasfromchina.com.